kids should not watch anime, but it's not for the reasons you might think. No, watching anime won't corrupt your brain, it won't turn you into some demonic gooner, so then why shouldn't kids watch it? Because they will praise the most absolute dog shit you've ever heard of and go on to regret it when they're older. And how do I know this? Because I was one such kid. So in today's video, I want to go through 10 plus years of my own top 10 lists and basically roast myself. So with that out of the way, let's travel back in time. The year is 2013. Barack Obama is sworn in for his second term as president, the Ravens win their second Super Bowl, and a much younger Doofy has just turned 15. Now up until this point, my exposure to anime and manga was relatively limited. However, there were events happening in the broader community that I would feel the ripples of. Both Bleach and Naruto were in their final manga arcs, the Toriko anime just released in North America, and the first season of Attack on Titan began airing. Meanwhile, I was converting my old Yu-Gi-Oh channel into an anime and manga channel under the name of Mr. Ragekeepers, marking the start of my first series anime boom, fueled largely by Netflix and Right Stuf. So the first list I want to look at comes from a video I released on April 5th, 2013, entitled My Top 15 Favorite Anime. I know, very original. Now again, keep in mind, I hadn't watched a lot of anime at this point. This was when I was really starting to first get into anime, and so basically my top 10 list consisted of the majority of what I had watched up until that point, minus a lot of childhood shows like Zatch Bell or Shaman King. So to provide some kind of like personal context for this list, starting with number 10, Soul Eater. If I remember correctly, this was about the time when Soul Eater was put onto Canadian Netflix. And so this prompted myself along with a bunch of friends to actually watch the series. And I want to say at this point I did earnestly like the series, but later on its absence will be notable because it'll kind of come out of a contrarian attitude of mine, whereby most of my friend group would glaze the hell out of the series, and me, I guess in some kind of subconscious effort to be different, wanted to differentiate myself from that, and so I would make it my personality for many years to be the Soul Eater hater. And in fact, maybe I can find a clip from my old channel of me doing a little rant about Soul Eater to just give you guys a bit of insight into what a high school doofy was like.
Alright, now let's move on to Black Star. Oh my, Black Star. He's basically a ripoff of a already terrible ripoff. I mean, he's obviously a Naruto ripoff. I mean, he's a ninja. He uses a shadow clone in one of his fights. He's very narcissistic and egotistic. He's cocky. He's basically Naruto with blue hair. And I hate Naruto, so Black Star. He also has a terrible voice actor and seiyuu, so really, other than his looks, which aren't even that cool, he's a pretty shitty character, and they really should have replaced him with something. They could have came up with something better than fucking another Naruto, honestly. I mean, I know he's a ninja, but you don't have to take the whole Naruto route. I mean, there's Ramno on half. Like, why the fuck did they not copy off the main character of that? That would have been so much cooler. But, yeah, fuck Black Star.
I mean, in retrospect, it's a perfectly fine anime. I enjoy it, and now I'm somewhat nostalgic about it, but it certainly wouldn't have any kind of place on my top 10. Now, at number 9, again, this was Black Butler, another anime I would have watched from Canadian Netflix. Not really much of note to say here, other than like it was kind of popular at the time, and I bought into the hype. Again, not really having much of a bar for evaluating anime or manga. I just kind of consumed what was popular, and by virtue of it being popular, I guess I just thought it was pretty good. However, now we get into some of the interesting picks. So Black Blood Brothers and Kaze no Stigma were both DVDs that I purchased from Right Stuf on like an extreme discount. And so because I had that sort of financial investment into them, I think that fostered a sense of charitability within me that when I did watch them, I thought it was the greatest things in sliced bread. Now, upon reflection, these were pretty damn mediocre series in retrospect. But again, like, you're in high school, there is this kind of subconscious drive to, distinguish yourself against your friends, and so this was kind of like my niche that I wanted to really lean into, hence why they were kind of higher than more popular series at the time, like Black Butler and Soul Eater. At number 6, this is where things kind of get interesting from a broader perspective, Toriko. Now, for a little bit of context, in the manga world, at least in North America, like I mentioned, Bleach and Naruto were already kind of in their final arcs. And Bleach specifically was famously on a bit of a downward trend. I believe it would have either wrapped up this year or early in the next year. Bleach was, from a public perspective, kind of dead in the water. Regardless of the fact that it was ending, just the quality had kind of dropped off. It lost some of its core fan base by this point. And so, there was this kind of like stirring going on. You'd see a lot of younger folk, myself included, saw Toriko kind of getting this push. And this is probably no coincidence that this is all occurring around the same time that the anime is being released in English dub over here in North America. But anyways, all this kind of hubbub about Toriko created the perception that this was the next big Shonen Jump series and that this was replacing Bleach in the big three. And so me, I guess, in an attempt to get ahead of the trend that I thought was going to exist, which in retrospect didn't exist at all, this was me trying to kind of plant my flag into Toriko and say, look at this, guys, I was kind of here first. Look at me, I'm hip, I'm new. And really, I'd probably only seen the first 25 episodes of Toriko at this point. It was actually something me and my good friend Iman Super Cool Bulls and a couple of other friends really bonded over. We'd have Friday night anime nights. We'd get some Dominion pizzas, a case of Coca-Cola, go over to Iman's house and just watch some Toriko. And it was a really good vibe. I would genuinely like to give the manga a serious shot. I'm not expecting it to blow my mind or anything, but something about the gourmet hunters I thought was a pretty interesting concept. The art was quite nice, blah, blah, blah. But, I don't want you guys to call the moral police on me for supporting the manga, so I'm going to just leave it at that. I don't feel like I need to belabor much of the top 5. I mean, Gurren Lagann was also on Netflix about this time, extremely popular, and frankly, still in my top 10. Number 4, though, is Naruto, and I think this might catch a lot of people by surprise, as, for those who, really know me, I'm quite the big Naruto head. But again, it's important to understand that I don't know, as a high school kid, frankly, I was just really susceptible to public perception. There was at once this kind of desire to individuate myself and differentiate myself against others, but also kind of follow in the footsteps of those that I admired. And at the time, a big name would have been Code Provider. But more generally, there was a lot of disdain for the ending of Naruto around this time. I mean, it was an awful time to be a Naruto fan. And I think being young and impressionable, I kind of convinced myself to turn on something I loved for so much of my childhood in an effort to fit in, And we'll see with future lists, maybe not so much with the anime, but with the manga, which I hope to do in another video. I do try to open myself up to more, darker, edgier series at this time in an effort to fit in with the cool guys and kind of reject that part of my youth. But the fact that it's still on the list is pretty good, because there will be times when it's not on there at all, which is me being dishonest with myself. It always has been my favorite anime, to be completely honest. But, I shifted my willingness to admit that depending on what was popular at the time amongst the people I found myself in company with or watched regularly. Number 3 is Gun Sword. This, I want to say, is probably another Netflix anime. An actually genuinely decent mech series, for those curious. And I want to say by the guy that either directed or wrote Code Geass. 2 is Black Cat. This one was completely sold to me by Iman Super Cool Bulls. I had been reading the manga. This was probably one of the first manga that I seriously got into. And number 1 is Darker Than Black. Another Netflix anime, should come as no surprise. And it's important to know that the variety of anime on Netflix at this time wasn't particularly large. So I was consuming basically all that they had to offer, specifically with respect to action series. And now, I had heard murmurs online of Darker Than Black. This was a generally well-received anime. But when I first tried to get into it, I just couldn't get into it. If I searched my phone, I could probably find text message I sent to Iman Super Cool Bulls telling him, oh my god, how do people enjoy this? It's so awful. I think what particularly struck me as odd was the kind of bi-episodic structure. Back then, I didn't really have an appreciation for that. I particularly liked anime for its kind of serial overarching story plots. That's specifically why I kind of turned my back to Western cartoons and what have you. But once I really got into it, something about its atmosphere, it's really immersive. It really sucks you in. There's a lot of clever writing that happens in the series. Really unique premises that I think it uses really well. Spoiler alert, this is an anime that's still on my list. So again, one of the few that kind of survived the test of time. Now, don't expect me to go into that much detail with every subsequent list, but I just kind of wanted to give the groundwork and the context for my very first anime top 10 that kind of laid the basis of my taste, and seeing how that shaped is going to be a lot easier with that context in mind. So moving on just to June of 2013, I made a video called My Top 25 Favorite Anime. So within these few months, I'd already, doubled or tripled the amount of anime I watched. And what we'll see here is, again, a lot of recency bias. So at number 10, we have Code Geass. This was something that I just watched for the first time, and you've guessed it, from Netflix. And obviously, this is a highly critically acclaimed series, so it should go without saying that it penetrated my list so quickly. However, the more interesting take is at number 9, Valve Rave The Liberator. This is, again, a kind of manifestation of my desire to be different. This is another kind of mech series in space with a very, thoughtful protagonist. I don't know if he's really the protagonist. I forgot his name at this point. The white-haired kid, kind of presents as a Lelouch or a Light type character, really thoughtful, outplaying others. And I did genuinely enjoy that first season quite a bit. And so I think me putting that just above Code Geass, again, is just a statement. Yeah, Code Geass is good, but I've got my own thing that's better. At number 8, we have Witchblade, another anime from Netflix. This one, though, I think does deserve a little bit of note because it certainly hit some of the emotional notes for me, which a lot of other anime at this time hadn't. I think the ending of Gun Sword might have, but like nothing in Toriko or nothing in Soul Eater really pulled at my heartstrings. Witchblade had a couple of really powerful moments, I think, especially with respect to like the mother and her daughter, that relationship. I mean, this was over 10 years ago. I can't exactly speak to it now, but I do have this kind of vivid memory of having somewhat of an emotional experience with Witchblade, hence why it was here. Now, what I think is interesting is at number 7, Black Butler, which has now moved up 2 spots. I might have watched the second season by this point, and that probably just did something for me. I don't know. I did have a bit of a phase where I thought Sebastian was the coolest guy ever, so that's whatever. Number 6 is Eden of the East, so that one kind of came in like out of nowhere from Netflix, and it just hit a lot of notes for me. But I talk about this a lot more in my top 50, my latest top 50 video, so if you want more of an exposition on why Eden of the East is so great, you can watch that. Now at number 5, we see Naruto dropping 1 spot. Again, it was in its final arc, it was receiving a lot of backlash, and I don't know if in a vacuum, what I was watching week to week would have caused me to drop it as much as I'm going to in terms of where it ranks. I do generally think that I was viewing it maybe more negatively because of the community perception, especially by those that I found myself in company with. But at the same time, I definitely remember reading some of the later chapters and without having like the kind of holistic perspective or time to reflect on it, things like Sasuke saying he wanted to be Hokage or Kiba saying he wanted to be Hokage. Scenes like that were definitely jarring the first time that I read them. And again, I don't think I was approaching them super charitably, but I also don't think I didn't have the whole in mind when I had that reaction, you know what I mean? So it's difficult to say if on its own the quality of Naruto is dropping so much that it deserved to fall down the list like it is. But regardless, the fact of the matter is I was very much subject to that kind of perception, so here we are. At number 4, we have Black Cat, which is now dropped by 2 slots. Again, I think this is more so a consequence of number 3 entering for the first time, Attack on Titan. And I mean, this anime was kind of taking the anime community and, dare I say, the broader media-consuming community by storm. This was heralded as the best animated anime by everyone who heralded things, myself included. And maybe to a lot of us kind of weekly Shonen Jump bros who weren't used to something as, I don't know if mature is quite the right word I'd use, but it had a more serious and dark tone than a lot of the series I'd consumed prior. And so it really gripped me in a way I didn't know possible. At number 2, we have Gurren Lagann, which will raise 3 spots, which makes me think that I maybe now had finished it, like perhaps I hadn't finished it before. And then number 1 is Darker Than Black yet again, and this will become a trend, as we'll see. Springing forward, again, just a couple months, on August 1st, I released another top 10 favorite anime, and this one is quite interesting. So number 10, we have Tiger and Bunny. Again, this would have been an I-Man is Super Cool Bulls recommendation. This one, again, probably deserves a shout out for being one of the few anime to really invoke a strong emotional response from me. At number 9, Black Butler starts to fall. It starts to lose its grip on me. Number 8, we see Naruto fall even farther. But at number 7, again, this is where we're going to start to see me try to lean into more of those edgy series to differentiate myself from the dude bros. We've got 11 Eyes. Now, I probably wouldn't have admitted it at the time, but 11 Eyes was a recommendation I picked up from Shadow ACS, a YouTuber I used to follow quite regularly back in the day, who would have more niche anime picks, at least by my standards, and this was certainly one of them. Looking back at it, I'm not nearly as convinced of the quality of 11 Eyes as I think Shadow was, or as a younger Doofy was. But again, like, it did just have that unique splash, and I must say, like, this was a special anime for no other reason than I did bond with a couple people back in the day over it. Dean, I don't know if you're watching this, but this was the anime that, of course, me and you bonded over. At number 6, we have Blue Exorcist, which was just kind of the shonen of the month, we might say. Again, that was kind of my core taste back then. I think that's evident in a lot of the picks on these lists. And I guess this was just the hot new thing that was on the press. Number 5, we have Black Cat, which is dropped by 1. 4 is Gurren Lagann, which is dropped by 2. Number 3 is Attack on Titan still. Then number 2, we have a new entry, Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Just something that I kind of kicked down the road for a long time, given its length. But I did finally give it an earnest shot after being convinced by many people that this was the greatest anime to be bestowed upon Canadian Netflix. And alas, it was at least the second greatest anime to be bestowed upon Canadian Netflix. Because number 1, again, is Darker Than Black. Now, by 2014, Naruto was in the last year of its run, and as previously mentioned, the series had been subject to much online criticism, which pushed me away from the community. I began to downplay my love of it to follow in the footsteps of bigger content creators, such as Code Provider, and incidentally leaned into more pretentious series like 11 Eyes, Utawari Mono, pushed by the likes of Shadow ACS, and so on. It was also around this time that I would start exploring the world of manga outside of Weekly Shonen Jump. And so we're not going to discuss it today, but this is where I discovered Vinland Saga, which was released for the first time in North America in late 2013. And that kind of formed the starting point of my edgy seinen phase. But for now, let's look at some of the anime I was looking at. This first list comes from January 2014, where I made a 2-part video called Mr. Agekeeper's Top 10 Favorite Anime, numbers 10 to 4, and then numbers 3 to 1. And here I try to take a more analytical approach so you can see that me watching all of these anime manga content reviewers had started to affect how I approached the medium. I was a little more critical, and I would say, of course, these are net positive things. Now, if we just take a look at this list immediately before I even get into it, I'm going to highlight the fact that there are 6 new series. Right? So 6 new series in just 4 months. And looking back on it, I mean, it's hard to imagine how often I would change my list back then. Whereas now, I mean, I think my top 10 anime has been more or less the same for the better part of a decade. But with that aside, let's actually get into this list here. At number 10, we have Blue Exorcist, which has dropped 4 points since the last time. And I think, again, this is kind of the first symptom of my, I gotta escape the shonen community attitude. So we'll see with number 9, we got Utawere Mono, which was something I had taken up from Shadow ACS. I believe this is based on a visual novel. This I bought as a Save Edition DVD from Right Stuff, and it was good. Number 8 is K Project. I think by this point I had a Crunchyroll subscription, and I don't know if this is when K came out or not, but this is at least something that I saw that I found attractive, and I gave it a go. Number 7, we have Welcome to the NHK. Again, another new entry, and this was probably one of the first non-action series, or at least the more drama-centered, that I've really appreciated, which is interesting to look back at now because this sort of anime kind of is the foundation of my taste. Most series that I consume on a day-to-day basis are this format. So it's interesting that even as early as 2014, we can see this part of my taste starting to develop and bud. Number 6, we have Baccano, which is interesting because I think I only knew about Baccano from Durarara, which was big amongst, I say my friend group, but again, it was just I Man is Super Coolables. So I don't know if this was me trying to be different from him, establish something in the same territory, but something different, right? Anyways, number 5 is Hellwing Ultimate, which is possibly the first proper seinen series to make it on my list. I had previously owned the Anime Classics edition of the regular Hellsing, which is fun, and, looking back on it, it's quite nostalgic now, but something about Hellsing Ultimate, a little darker, kind of went to places that the original didn't, and I quite liked that. That was really attractive to a 16-year-old doofy. At number 4, we have Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, which dropped by 2 spots. Again, a symptom, I think, of my waning love for shonen. At number 3, we have Gurren Lagann, though, which kind of went up a bit more again, so don't know what's happening there. But I actually have a tie here at number 3. Attack on Titan is also tied for 3, so that would be a new spot for it, I guess. Number 2 is Beck. Right, so this is also something I bought from Right Stuff as a Save Edition DVD. This was particularly powerful to me at the time because I had just started playing bass and a bit of guitar, and my friend group was really trying to get a band on the go, and there were a lot of difficulties in that. I mean, for one, our musicianship wasn't up to par. We didn't necessarily have the equipment or technology to record, but between the 3 of us, we kind of got some things going. Nothing major ever came of it, but we did really spend a lot of time at, writing songs together, finding ways to put something into a recording. But essentially the whole band experience, right, from scratch, from an absolute novice to creating and playing music, that whole life that Beck depicted was extremely powerful to me, because not only did it kind of capture the externality of events that I was experiencing in terms of the actual grind to become a musician, but I think it did a really good job at depicting some of the internal dynamics of bandmates and the tensions that arise over creative differences or friendship dynamics and how they come into play. Again, those were oddly relatable to me even back then, so it was almost a no-brainer that it would end up in number 2. And then at number 1, to nobody's shock, is Darker Than Black. I would then wait almost 6 months before my next list, which would then be in July of 2014, from a video called Mr. Agekeeper's Top 10 Favorite Anime, and this one is kind of marked by a bit of stability in one respect, but a massive shakeup in another. So at number 10 we now have Baccano, which had dropped by 4 spots, but I've also included here Durarara. This is either the first time I genuinely watched Durarara, or this is the first time I stopped lying to myself and said it's actually pretty damn good. And in retrospect, better than Baccano. At number 9 was Rurouni Kenshin, though, so it is kind of interesting to see me still introducing new shonen into my viewing. And that's something that I don't think ever really changes. It just happens at a much slower pace, and it'll tend to be older series than, the new hot fad again, I guess, in an attempt to establish myself as some kind of old head, knowledgeable anime fan. Number 8 is Hellsing Ultimate, which is dropped by 3 spots. Number 7 is Attack on Titan, which dropped by 4 spots. And again, it's the same story we always see. At this point, Attack on Titan's fame and notoriety is so big that I felt the need to distinguish myself from it. I didn't want to just be another, follower of what's popular, and so I had to kind of reflect that on my list. At number 6, we actually have Eden of the East, which comes back for the first time in a couple of lists, which I find kind of shocking because I don't know if it's ever that it fell off in the sense of I didn't like it as much. It's just more so my lists became populated with whatever I was watching at the time that I really enjoyed. But I hope, I can't see right now, but I hope that this will be the last time Eden of the East has to return to the list, because this is truly one of my favorite anime of all time. At number 5, we have Brotherhood. At number 4, we have Gurren Lagann. At number 3, we have Beck, so each of those dropped by 1 spot. Now, this is where the big shakeup happens. Number 2 is Darker Than Black, so for the first time, it doesn't claim its spot as my favorite anime. And instead, what comes in at number 1 is Rainbow. Now, that's some real seinen cult classic shit right here. And I think I had watched this just on Funimation's YouTube channel. Now, you'll notice, of course, that at this point, Naruto's long been off my list for all the reasons I previously mentioned. But I do want to say that if there was ever an anime that came close to dethroning Naruto as my genuine favorite, it would have been Rainbow, because I had found this completely on a whim. I thought this was some real underground shit, and you know what? For the communities within which I was operating, it probably was. And I would push this upon everyone. So hard, and so much in fact that I think I not only convinced most of my friend group to watch it, but it even expanded to the periphery. So Atomy Bomb, we weren't super tight back then, but I even managed to get this shit into your friend group. So that just goes to speak how much I pushed it. Now, of course, I think we'll see in the future I ended up pushing it too hard, and the way I would see other people talk about it kind of irritated me. And this is something very common in my life. This is something I experience perhaps most frequently with Naruto. It just irritates the fuck out of me to see people give bad Naruto takes, which is why I tend to not discuss it online, despite it being overwhelmingly my favorite media franchise ever. But yeah, Rainbow, what a anime? I don't know, I'm not giving you a review here. We're talking about my taste. This is about me and not so much the anime. Next, we're going to move into 2015, what I call the pretentious years. So at this point, I had entered my last year of high school, and a lot of things were changing socially within my friend group. Anime and manga as an interest was starting to kind of wane. Other things became a lot more pressing at the time. But I do have 2 lists from this year that I think depict a general shift in my overall mental, and will kind of form the foundation of what I think is my genuine top 10 anime. So in January of 2015, I found an iPhone note that has my top 10 anime on it. And so at number 10, we have Mushishi, which would have been a new entry. Again, a cult classic anime, a cult classic seinen anime more specifically that I found on Netflix, I believe. And again, this was just another instance of me trying to fit in with the cool kids. At number 9 was Claymore, which again, I could really show off because it was a more mature shonen, right? It had darker themes, like this kind of dark fantasy vibe to it. It felt a little more serious at times. So I could kind of pride those aspects of it when I discussed it. This is the mature shonen fans shonen. And in retrospect, maybe it is. I don't know. It definitely probably blows a lot of Weekly Shonen Jump series out of the water in terms of its tone and the atmosphere, specifically in terms of being dark, eerie. I'm not sure. At number 8, we actually have Baccano and Durarara, which started to raise up a little bit, especially from that last list. Number 7 is Hellsing Ultimate, which raised up by 1. At number 6, though, is Gurren Lagann, which dropped by 2. We will see that this series kind of bounces around a lot. My interest in it kind of wanes or increases depending on what I'm watching at the time, what my taste is more specifically at the time. At number 5, we have Brotherhood. So actually, this might be, I think, the first time Brotherhood beats out Gurren Lagann. Number 4, we have Beck, which dropped by 1, interestingly. At number 3, we have Rainbow, which is now dropped by 2, and I would probably blame it on the fact it was getting very popular amongst my friends, and that irritated me, because that's just the fucking annoying asshole I was in high school. Number 2 is Darker Than Black. And at number 1, bit of a shocker, Eden of the East really came in clutch. So I think at this time I probably would have rewatched it for the second or third time, and I think it probably just hit a lot harder. Something about its brand of comedy and romance really struck a chord with me, but also the kind of drama that it presented alongside it, I just found to be really enthralling. Moving along into August of 2015, so we waited basically 8 months between these 2 lists. This one, though, was actually from a video, Top 10 Favorite Anime, August 2015, very original. And we've got some interesting picks here as well. Number 10, we have Serial Experiments Lain, which is still amongst one of my favorite anime, so it's nice to see it here. At this point, I think you understand the trajectory of my taste, and I don't have to explain exactly why this is here at all. At number 9 is Gurren Lagann. Number 8 is Monster. Again, cult classic seinen, had to be here. Number 7 is Beck. So this series, at least, even if it drops, does kind of linger, and I'm glad that's the case because I still consider it a very special series. At number 6, we have Ergo Proxy, which I think only enjoyed a short stint on my list because I would later turn on it and use it as an object to exercise my quote-unquote critical thought. So this would be kind of my token seinen hate series, even though it's an anime original, and so it doesn't actually fit in with any of the conventional manga demographics. But this would be like my token dark anime sacrifice. So I would roast the show to this. I would talk about how pretentious it was, how it used a lot of empty symbolism. And in me attacking the series, I guess I was hoping to come across as, more intellectual than perhaps I was. Number 5 was Rainbow, again, just following that path down the list as it enjoys more praise from my friends. Number 4, that was Brotherhood. So, that is kind of like the perennial shonen series that just stuck around. Now, at number 3 is fucking Future Diary, and that is a crazy shout. Holy shit. I don't know what it was, but when I watched it, that shit just hooked me so hard, so intensely, even if only for a short period. Then at number 2, we have Old Faithful, Darker Than Black, and number 1, Eden of the East. So it's nice to see that series kind of ended off this little era of my life. Now, by 2016, I had just graduated, and anime manga was completely off my radar. 2017, I enrolled in university, and through my now wife, we kind of began to re-explore my love of anime. We would watch, Studio Ghibli movies or Toradora, Your Lie in April, different romance series that we both kind of found enjoyment in. And so through our kind of semi-regular viewing of those kinds of series, I found myself getting more interested in anime and manga at large. And so by March of 2010, I was kind of in a second phase of my anime boom. I have a list here, and I don't exactly remember where I got this list from, but at number 10 we have Death Parade, and this was really just me trying to catch up to some of the more critically acclaimed series that came out in the time since I had last watched anime, and I was pleasantly surprised. There were lots of little things about this series I loved. I love how it kind of subtly explored this liminal space in the between life and afterlife. It was never explicitly shoved down your throat. We never got whole monologues explaining how every little thing works, but it was kind of revealed very subtly. At this point, I had a pretty strong appreciation for more episodic series, and I thought some of the Easter eggs, maybe in the later episodes and how it wrapped up was really powerful. At number 9, though, we have Tatami Galaxy, and this is the pretentious anime fan's favorite anime. And I kind of wanted to get in on that image, I think. If I'm honest, back then, I don't know if I really loved this anime as much as I loved the image of being a Tatami Galaxy enjoyer. Now, I'm giving you guys all these deep psychological insights into why things are on my list given my specific circumstance at the time. But it's important to note that at the time, these aren't conscious decisions. Frankly, I might be overstating how much the psychological aspect plays into their ranking, but I do just want to highlight them as an evolution of my taste, of my maturity, because I think that's the interesting part about this. We're going through my top 10 list. We're kind of exploring how one man's taste has changed over a decade. So it's quite the broad scope of lists that we're exploring here from different points, very critical points in my life. And so maybe that's not interesting to you guys, and that's fair enough, but I really wanted to do this video for me. I thought it was an interesting concept, and hopefully there are enough of you out there that'll kind of enjoy this as well. At number 8, we have Your Lie in April, which again was a series I enjoyed dearly with my wife. At number 7 is Gurren Lagann. Number 6 is Beck. Number 5 is Rainbow, so it's nice to see that it kind of stabilized. I had been far enough removed from a lot of those people in high school where, I can kind of just appreciate it in a vacuum. It doesn't have to fall any farther, but because of the existing stains on it, it's probably not going to go any higher. At number 4, we've got Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. At number 3, we have Eden of the East, which kind of takes a bit of a dive from number 1. And I don't know if this was a result of me liking it less, but more so me just liking other things more, such as number 2, Darker Than Black, which I suspect I probably rewatched around this time, and it just, inspired fond memories of when I first got into anime and manga. But then number 1, on the topic of pretentious anime and manga fans, Neon Genesis Evangelion. And kind of like with Tatami Galaxy, at the time, I don't know if I loved it as much as this list might suggest I did. And in fact, there is an old video on my Mr. Ragekeeper's account, which I will show you a little clip of from 2016, kind of ragging on Neon Genesis Evangelion. Now, Evangelion is a series I've put off watching since the moment I found out there was more than just Naruto and Yu-Gi-Oh! Out there. And I can say that without a shadow of a doubt, this anime is nothing I haven't seen before. It's the same cliches we've seen riddled throughout countless other anime series from the inception of the genre to the present day. There's nothing groundbreaking about the plot, and the cast of characters is very typical for an anime of this nature. You've got your whiny lead who will man up when it's convenient for the progression of the plot. You've got an outspoken anti-girl, as I like to call them, who is constantly displaying an immature behavior relative to her age. And then, you've got a very withdrawn girl who probably possesses great strength and or knowledge with a most likely dark background. And the list just goes on. But obviously, there's a lot of instances of me hating something early on and then kind of doing a 180 for various reasons. And I mean, that's the case with both Ava and Darker the Black. So that's just something that's true of me, I guess. Now, I wouldn't end up making another list until the 2020s, and then specifically October of 2020. And this really was the return of the king, because this is when I created our current channel. And this is when I put out Doofy's top 10 anime of all time. No longer Mr. Ragekeepers, I'm fully embracing the nickname that I have enjoyed in my personal life for years at this point. And so in this video, at number 10, we have Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Number 9, we have Beck. Importantly, this wasn't a kind of rejection of shonen, because as we'll see later on in this list, that's almost the opposite of what's happening at this point. I say that this is like the return of the king era, not just because this is like the return of my YouTube career on a new channel, but this is also a return somewhat to sincerity. A return to your roots, a return to being honest with yourself. So at number 8, we have You Lie in April. At number 7, we have Gurren Lagann. At number 6, we have Fooly Cooly, and this was an interesting series for people in my sphere at this time. Newberton, if you're watching this, shout out to you. We had many an argument over this series. There was actually a bit of divide in my kind of core online friend group. Choicinator, Newberton, J-Dog, myself, J-Chip. I don't know if Snow was around at this time, but shout out Snow if you're listening. There was this kind of like harsh divide about the Fooly Cooly love. Newberton was very much on the side of, it's a bit of a headache of a show, like it's just kind of like eclectic and loud and bright. And I am, perhaps intentionally misdiagnosing Newberton's complaints at this point, because fuck that guy. But then this prompted me to do somewhat of like a video essay, but instead of it being like a highly edited essay, it was literally an essay that I wrote and I just read it on my webcam into a mic.
Fooly Cooly is a 6-episode OVA that aired from April of 2000 to March of 2001, and that's been heralded as a masterpiece by many, myself included. However, as time goes on, it may or may not be clear why this anime is so special, and so today I'd like to explain just that, what is so great about Fooly Cooly.
I tried to diagnose what makes Fooly Cooly good, and I gave this big speech about it being kind of like a blank canvas, equally interesting for the sort of creative vision behind it, but also for its ability to be projected upon by people and, this kind of coming of age time of their life. Anyways, it sparked a lot of cool conversations, kind of a seminal series in the Doofy lore, but also just a good series in its own right, of course, and that goes without saying. Something I discussed in my top 50 anime. At number 5, we have Rainbow. It's kind of like stabilized here at this point. Number 4 is Ava, which had dropped off quite a bit, maybe again that return to sincerity, realizing that my initial love of it was probably a little overblown because I wanted to be an Ava fan. Number 3, we have Darker the Black. Not a massive drop off. The only reason it's dropped at all is because number 2 is Eden of the East. But importantly, number 1 is actually explicitly Naruto. No funny business. Again, a return to sincerity. This is when I had realized that, Naruto is my favorite series of all time. I think the dust had settled since the manga had ended. I think that it wasn't the talk of the town anymore, and that gave me a space to really reflect on the things I enjoyed without being pressured into one opinion or another. So it is really nice to see myself embrace Naruto for the first time in years. And so that is the history of my top 10 favorite anime. If you want to see the most updated version of this list, then I encourage you to check out my top 50 anime and manga video. This was fun. I don't know if it was for you, but if you've made it this far, drop me a goose emoji in the comments. And until next time, don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe. My name is Doofy, and see you next time.